Urban Student Global Brief Magazine. Let's talk about a new Arctic League for the post-pandemic world. Let me propose, and this is something coming out of our institute, the Institute for 21st Century Questions, which publishes Global Brief Magazine, but which is involved in a host of questions around the world and in Canada in particular. Let me propose the idea of an Arctic League as the first major post-pandemic 21st century institution for the peace. Now, what am I talking about? In the Arctic, you have an objective phenomenon, pandemic or not. That is that the sea ice is melting with great rapidity, climate change oblige, and a lot of permafrost is melting. These are objective realities. The other objective reality is that this Arctic space, which is fast opening up, has at least 4 continents that touch each other as a result of this melt, touch each other now almost territorially, but also geopolitically, economically, strategically, and before long in transportation terms, and cultural terms, and scientific terms. You have North America, Europe, Eurasia or the post-Soviet space, and Asia or East Asia in particular, all coming to a head together in the Arctic space, which is really, really huge. In the Canadian Arctic space alone, territorially, we're talking about a territory the size of the European Union, just on the Canadian side. So really, this is the biggest space in the world, fast opening up in a post-pandemic context, bringing together these huge continents, and more sharply, bringing together the 3 great powers of the post-pandemic 21st century. The United States through North America, China through East Asia, and Russia. Russia, the major Arctic power through the Eurasian space. And let me humbly put Canada as a 4th major power, and obviously the 2nd largest Arctic power. But the 3 major strategic players, China, the United States, and Russia, really come to head in the Arctic space. And you will say, well, what about China? Why was China there? Well, China is close to the Arctic physically, geographically, but also it brings sudden relevance to the Arctic that wasn't there in a pre-climate change, pre-melting context. That is, the Arctic only becomes economically and strategically interesting because of China, because of the sudden rise or resurgence of China. These transportation routes, the energy routes, resource routes, and also strategic threats and tensions all become relevant, not because of the United States and Russia alone, which have been there for a while jousting, but because China all of a sudden becomes a part of the equation. So now to the proposal. The proposal is to say that in a post-pandemic world where you've got a de-stitching of the global order, diminishing trust amongst all the great powers and between a lot of countries and continents, erosion of the utility and efficacy of international institutions. In the Arctic, we need a solution for this space that's opening up, and now let it be the first major post-pandemic 21st century institution that answers a specific objective problem, which is the opening up of this Arctic space through a regulatory framework, a deep regulatory framework, but also restitches international confidence and provides the first major post-pandemic touch point between the great powers, China, the United States, and Russia, in the Arctic, in a deep league, Arctic League. Now, we're building on perhaps on the base of the Arctic Council, but I'm not wed to the Arctic Council as nomenclature. The idea is really of a full-on economic league through transportation links. Let's start with the air, aviation transport across the Arctic between all the 4 continents of which I spoke. Obviously, sea transport, rail transport, auto transport within the continents, scientific cooperation, strategic cooperation, oceanic cooperation, climate change cooperation, space cooperation, all for the peace, rather than building this up militarily slowly on all sides, or a de minimis Arctic Council framework excluding China, excluding other countries. Let's have a de maximis framework that really regulates this Arctic space richly, provides great economic rents, scientific rents, and really provides a space in which you have peaceable coexistence and intercourse between the major continents that will provide dividends for indigenous populations, for smaller countries in that space as well. Here we will bring even the Koreas, we'll bring India through South Asia, but obviously Southeast Asia, but with Japan of necessity, China perhaps centrally, and on the Russian side you've got Russia and the post-Soviet space, all of the European Union, if not just the north of the European Union, the Nordic countries, and continental North America. You've got at least an economic market of 2 billion people and a strategic market of 4 billion people, which is a good part of the world population, the majority, if I may. Let me finally argue that this can be driven by Canada, by Canadian diplomacy. Canada still has a brand for this. It can be done out of the beautiful city of Whitehorse. Let us call it the Whitehorse Treaty. It can be based in Canada as a reasonably friendly, if not neutral, not fully neutral player, but really bringing these powers and all the countries together in a peaceable framework rather than building up for future tensions. Now let me just address one key point of confusion in other people's thinking. I'm not suggesting that the Arctic is a theater of imminent warfare. If there's warfare, the Arctic was certainly a prime candidate for hostilities, but it is not the central theater. It is a central theater for economic warfare and regulatory warfare in the immediate future by virtue of the de-stitching and unstitching of the global order, deep non-confidence and poor confidence between the great powers. In the Arctic space, which is very lightly regulated, that is a great theater for this type of contradiction, which over time can lead to hostilities. But the point is that by virtue of having deep integration in the Arctic, you create a real touch point, touchstone for cooperation amongst the great powers that can be transferred to other theaters, or that mitigates some of the hostilities that you have in the South China Sea, in the Middle East theater, in the European theater, in the African theater, and so on. I hope you like it. I think it can be built. The Arctic is much loved. It is glorious. It is huge. And the idea is pretty big too.